There is a building in Barcelona that has been under construction for 144 years. It has never received a single euro of government funding. For 137 of those 144 years, it was being built without a legal permit, and the man who designed it died before a quarter of it was finished. Interestingly, that man is now on the path to becoming a Catholic saint. On October 30th, 2025, the Sagrada Familia became the tallest church on earth. But the real story of how it got there is one that almost nobody has told in full. This video is a documentary that uncovers the story of an impossible idea, an obsessive genius, a city that looked away for over a century, and the most audacious building project in human history. It is a captivating account of how Barcelona built the world's tallest church, and did it illegally for 137 years. In the 1860s, the Industrial Revolution was transforming many cities. Barcelona was apparently not left out of this phenomenon, as its factories kept multiplying and its working class swelling. But with that growth comes everything that shadows it: poverty, social decay, and a growing sense among Catholic conservatives that the city's spiritual foundations are crumbling. Then came Josep Maria Bocabella, a bookseller and a devout Catholic who had founded an organization called the Asociación Espiritual de Devotos de San José in 1866. Bocabella's mission was straightforward: to build a church that is not just an ordinary church, but an expiatory church, a place where the faithful could come to atone, to pray, to spiritually compensate for what Bocabella sees as the moral decline of modern society. The money for it would come entirely from ordinary people, voluntary donations, no state, no institution, no wealthy patron writing a single check. Bocabella believed that contributing financially to the construction of the church meant participating in an act of collective atonement. He encouraged the people of Barcelona to give what they could, and the church would be built in their name. For over a decade, he collected donations quietly and persistently. And then, in 1881, he had collected just enough money to buy a plot of land. The plot sat in the newly planned Eixample neighborhood, which at that time was still on the semi-rural outskirts of the city. The estimated cost of acquiring the land was 172,000 pesetas, obtained from every centimo of donations. With the land acquired, Bocabella now needed an architect. On this note, he hired Francisco de Paula del Villar y Lozano, a respected Barcelona architect who was also the diocesan architect of the city. Del Villar's design was conventional, competent, and entirely predictable. It comprises a neo-Gothic church in the tradition of the great medieval cathedrals, with 3 naves, a crypt, pointed arches, and flying buttresses. Standard, safe, professional. And on the Feast of St. Joseph, on March 19, 1882, the church's cornerstone was laid. Bishop Urquinaona officiated it, and construction began on the crypt. But within a year, Del Villar resigned from his architecture role in the mega construction. The exact reason for Francisco del Villar's resignation is still debated till date. Some people believed he left as a result of disagreements over construction methods. Some believed it was due to disputes over finances, while others said it was because of professional friction with the project's overseers. Whatever the reason, when Del Villar walked off the site in 1883, Bocabella had to look for a replacement. And the person he chose was surprisingly a 31-year-old man who had never built a church before. His name was Antoni Gaudí y Cornet. Antoni Gaudí was born on June 25, 1852, in Reus, Catalonia. His family were coppersmiths and gave him an upbringing that became fundamental to how he understood space. As a child, Gaudí suffered from rheumatism. His condition was so severe that it sometimes stopped him from walking. During those periods of forced stillness, he spent his time studying nature with intense, concentrated attention. He would puzzle at the geometry of shells, the branching patterns of trees, the way mountains erode into curves that look almost designed. This was not a hobby. This was the beginning of his architectural philosophy. Eventually, Gaudí studied architecture in Barcelona, graduating in 1878. His earliest commissions were eccentric and included the Casa Vicens, the Palau Güell, the Park Güell, and the Casa Betlló buildings that looked like nothing else in the world. By the time Bocabella chose this architectural prodigy for the Sagrada Familia in 1883, Gaudí had one important patron. His name was Eusebi Güell, a wealthy industrialist who had become Gaudi's greatest champion and financial sponsor. Since the Sagrada Familia was not a commission from a wealthy man, but a commission from the people, Gaudí treated it that way from the moment he accepted it. When he looked at Del Villar's neo-Gothic plans for the church project, he wasn't satisfied with the design. It was at this moment that Gaudí decided he was going to build something no one had ever seen. He kept the Gothic spirit of the church's earliest design, but stripped away every element that required external structural support. Hence, his design had no flying buttresses and no separate external columns propping up the roof from outside. Inside the Sagrada Familia, the columns would not be straight vertical shafts. They would branch like trees at precisely calculated heights, distributing the weight of the roof downward through multiple paths, exactly as a tree distributes the weight of its canopy. But here is what makes this even more extraordinary. Gaudí was designing surfaces of mind-bending geometric complexity, curved forms that appear organic but are in fact built from straight lines moving through space. And he had no computer, but used chains and weighted ropes suspended between fixed points to aid his design. Apparently, a hanging chain naturally forms what mathematicians call a catenary curve. When you flip that curve upside down, it becomes the structurally perfect shape for an arch. Using this method, the architect photographed the inverted reflections of these models in mirrors and built elaborate three-dimensional models from chains and small bags of lead shot. He called this tridimensional funicular modeling. What he was doing, in essence, was running structural simulations by hand, using gravity itself as his calculator. Modern engineers who have studied his models say the results align almost perfectly with what sophisticated computer analysis would produce today. But Gaudí was not naive about the limits of this method. He knew it was a powerful, extraordinary tool, but the real source of his design was always his observation of nature. He had often used the chains to confirm what his instincts had already told him. This is why, 99 years after his death, the structural engineering inside the Sagrada Familia still meets modern earthquake standards. Not because he was lucky, but because he was watching the right things. Let's stop and look at what Gaudí was actually proposing to build, because the scale of the ambition, even by today's standards, is almost incomprehensible. His proposal was a basilica 90 meters long, comprising 18 towers and 3 monumental facades, each telling a different chapter of the Christian story. The Nativity facade, facing east, toward the rising sun, would celebrate birth, creation, joy. It would be dense with sculpture, plants, animals, angels, the infant Christ, organic, teeming with life. The Passion facade, facing west, toward the setting sun, would tell the story of Christ's suffering and death. It would be stark, angular, deliberately stripped of comfort. And the Glory facade, facing south, the grandest of the 3, still unfinished to this day, would represent resurrection, the final triumph. Out of the 18 towers, there are 12 towers of the apostles, approximately 100 meters each. 4 towers of the evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, at 135 meters, the Tower of the Virgin Mary at 138 meters, and at the very center, rising above everything, the Tower of Jesus Christ at 172.5 meters tall. Gaudí had one rule for the height of the central tower. It had to be tall enough to be seen clearly from across the city, but it could never be taller than Montserrat, the sacred mountain that overlooks Barcelona. His reasoning? Man's creation should not surpass God's. Hence, the height was set at 172.5 meters, making it the tallest church in the world. The proposed interior would have nearly 300 skylights in the ceiling, designed so that natural light enters the building and refracts differently depending on the time of day, the season, and the direction. In the morning, the Nativity side, facing east, floods with warm golden light. In the evening, the Passion side, facing west, catches the last red light of the setting sun. The building was designed to track the movement of the sun, to transform light into liturgy. This was not architecture as decoration. This was architecture as theology. From 1883, Gaudí worked on the Sagrada Familia alongside his other commissions for 2 decades. But somewhere around 1914, after his closest collaborators began to age and fall ill, something shifted. He gave up every commission, every client, every other building, and moved into a small chamber in his workshop on the Sagrada Familia site. He stopped cutting his hair, stopped shaving, but fasted so severely and reportedly ate only lettuce dipped in milk for lunch at times that his health visibly deteriorated. He became a monk who happened to be an architect. Visitors to the site in his final years described him as a small, frail old man who walked the scaffolding with absolute certainty, who could glance at a column and immediately know whether it was right, who spoke to his workers not as an employer, but as a kind of spiritual guide. He told anyone who asked about the completion of the church the same thing: "My client is not in a hurry," by which he meant God could wait. The building would be what it needed to be, no matter how long it took. In the entire 144-year history of this construction project, it has never received a single euro of government funding. Not from the Spanish state, not from the regional government of Catalonia, not from the Vatican, not from the Archdiocese of Barcelona, not 1 euro. Everything has been paid for by private donations and, in the modern era, by ticket sales. This was Gaudí's insistence from the beginning, and it remains policy to this day. He said, "The temple of the Sagrada Família is made by the people, and therefore, in it, their way of being is manifested. The building belongs to no institution. It belongs to whoever contributed to it." There are well-documented accounts of Gaudí himself going door to door in Barcelona's bourgeois neighborhoods asking for money. When prospective donors refused, he reportedly sat on their doorstep and refused to leave. The building was literally begged into existence. Today, the fundraising model looks rather different. In 2024, the Sagrada Família received 4,833,658 visitors, a record high. 87.3% of them came from outside Spain. Their ticket money, their shop purchases, their donations, all of it feeds back into construction. In 2024 alone, the income realized was about 133.9 million euros, and 51.9% of the money went directly to construction. The pace of construction has always been directly tied to how much money was coming in. When donations were high, construction accelerated. When they dried up, as they did during the Spanish Civil War and the 2020 pandemic, construction stopped. This is a building that is still, in every meaningful sense, being built the way Bocabella originally intended, one donation at a time. By the spring of 1926, Antoni Gaudí was 73 years old. He had spent the last 12 years of his life almost entirely on the Sagrada Família site. His world had shrunk to the footprint of the building. His closest friend and chief model maker, Llorenç Matamala, had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. In his final months, as Matamala was hospitalized, Gaudí stopped returning to his former home at Park Güell. He had nowhere else he wanted to be except the site. On the evening of June 7, 1926, Gaudí finished his work for the day. As he left the site, his last words to his assistant, a man named Vicente, were, "Come in early tomorrow. We're going to do some really beautiful things." He was walking to confession at his usual church, a walk he made regularly. He reached the Gran Via de les Corts Catalanes at the crossing with Carrer de Bailén. He stepped back from one tram and was struck by a second coming in the opposite direction. Gaudí fell on the road, badly injured, with passers-by gathered around him. None of them recognized who he was. He carried no identification. His clothes were those of a beggar. Several taxi drivers refused to take him to the hospital, either deterred by his appearance or fearing they would not be paid. Eventually, a police officer intervened and arranged for him to be taken to the Hospital de la Santa Creu, the city's old hospital, not the modern one. Perhaps they did so because nobody knew who he was, or because he looked like a man who could not afford the modern hospital. He lay there unidentified for more than a day. It was only on June 8th that Mossèn Gil Parés, the chaplain of the Sagrada Família, grew worried at Gaudí's absence and began checking the hospitals along his usual routes. He found him at Hospital de la Santa Creu. By then, it was too late. Gaudí died on June 10, 1926, just 15 days before his 74th birthday. Barcelona reacted as though a king had died. A massive funeral procession carried his body from the hospital down La Rambla, where tens of thousands of people lined the street, to the Sagrada Família. King Alfonso XIII of Spain sent a sympathy telegram. Gaudí was buried in the crypt of the church he had given his life to build. He had completed roughly 1/4 of the Sagrada Familia. The project had 100 or more years still to run, and nobody had any idea how to finish it. Ten years after Gaudí's death, Spain tore itself apart. The Spanish Civil War reached Barcelona in July 1936. In the chaos and violence of those early weeks, anarchist militias from the FAI stormed cultural and religious institutions across the city. On the night of July 20th, 1936, they reached the Sagrada Família. They broke into Gaudí's workshop on the site and destroyed it. His original plaster models, the intricate, painstakingly constructed three-dimensional guides to every surface, every column, and every arch, were smashed. His photographs, his drawings, his notebooks were burned. The family tombs of Boccabella and others in the crypt were desecrated. Sadly, the most complete archive of information about how to build the Sagrada Familia was gone. While all this destruction was going on, Gaudí's tomb in the crypt was left untouched. Even the men who burned his workshop apparently could not bring themselves to disturb the grave of Antoni Gaudí. When the war ended, an architect named Francesc de Paula Quintana took over the site. His task was almost impossible: to reconstruct the plans of this extraordinary building with all its complexity from whatever fragments, photographs, published drawings, and memories of Gaudí's collaborators that still existed. It took years. And the reconstruction was necessarily incomplete and interpretive because no human being alive had seen everything Gaudí had originally designed. This made people question whether what is being built today is actually what Gaudí intended. In 1965, a letter was published in La Vanguardia, signed by Le Corbusier, Alvar Aalto, Joan Miró, and Antoni Tàpies, some of the most important names in 20th century architecture and art. Their message was simple: construction on the Sagrada Familia should stop. Continuing to build after Gaudí's plans had been destroyed was not honoring his vision, it was replacing it. Construction continued regardless. In 2008, prominent Catalan architects raised the same argument again. Their criticism focused on the Passion facade, completed by sculptor Josep Maria Subirach, whose deliberately stark, modernist approach many felt was incompatible with Gaudí's organic style. The foundation responsible for the church construction continuation thought otherwise. They believed the Passion facade was meant to feel different from the Nativity side. Hence, the debate has never ended. For most of the 20th century, construction on the Sagrada Familia moved slowly, intermittently, and by hand. Then, in the 1980s, an architect named Jordi Bonet i Armengol brought computers to the site, not to redesign the building, but to understand what Gaudí had designed. Computer-aided design allowed architects for the first time to digitally model Gaudí's geometric surfaces, to understand the mathematics beneath the organic forms, and to translate that understanding into construction instructions that modern builders could actually follow. In the 1990s, aeronautics software normally used for aerospace engineering was adapted for the site. Later, parametric design tools replaced it. Today, stone for the central towers is quarried in Withnell Quarry near Chorley in Lancashire, England. Selected in 2018 because the original source at Montserrat Mountain could not provide stone of sufficient quality at depth. That stone is cut by CNC milling machines, computer-controlled cutting tools that shape each piece to precise specifications based on digital models of Gaudí's geometry. The pieces are then shipped to Barcelona and assembled like a three-dimensional puzzle. It is the most advanced construction technology on the planet, in service of a vision conceived 140 years ago. Architect Mark Burry, who has worked on the construction team, described the building as a giant sculpture within the city. That description is more literal than it might sound. Now we get to the part of this story that is genuinely extraordinary. For 137 years, the Sagrada Familia was being constructed without a legal building permit. And here's how it happened. When construction began in 1882, the land sat in the municipality of Sant-Martí de Provençals, an independent town, not yet part of Barcelona. In 1885, Gaudí submitted a formal permit application with signed blueprints to the Sant-Martí municipal authorities. The municipality never formally responded, but construction continued. In 1897, Sant-Martí de Provençals was absorbed into Barcelona. The permit application and whatever informal approval that might have existed were lost in the bureaucratic transition, and nobody noticed, or if they did, nobody said anything. For over a century, the building went up. Mayors came and went. Tourists arrived in the tens of millions. UNESCO designated it a World Heritage Site in 1984. Pope Benedict XVI consecrated it as a minor basilica in 2010. All of it, without a legal permit. And in December 2016, Barcelona city officials went public with the discovery. The Sagrada Família, they announced, had no building permit. The foundation's response was that Gaudi's 1885 application constituted a legitimate original permit. But Barcelona's position was that after the Sant Martí absorption, new paperwork should have been filed. The argument went on for 2 years until a deal was reached in 2018. The foundation agreed to pay 36 million euros to the city of Barcelona, payable over the decade of continued construction. Then, in June 2019, after 137 years, a formal building permit was finally issued by Barcelona City Council. The permit itself cost an additional 4.6 million euros. It came with conditions: a cap on visitor numbers, contributions to city transport infrastructure, and cooperation with a planned metro line that would serve the basilica directly. The building permit secured in 2019 covered the construction of the basilica as it currently stands. It did not cover the glory facade. The glory facade, the grandest of the three facing south, is the one Gaudí described as the most important. It is the main entrance, the facade of resurrection, the culmination of the entire building's theological journey. And completing it as Gaudí envisioned, or as his successors have interpreted his vision, requires something that has quietly become one of Barcelona's most contentious urban disputes. To build the glory facade stairway and its full approaches, approximately 3,000 apartments and businesses would need to be demolished. Roughly 1,000 families would be displaced. The Association of Neighbours of the Sagrada Família and the Association for those affected by the Sagrada Família have been fighting this for years. The lawyer representing the Association for Those Affected, Salvador Barroso, has raised a more fundamental question. He argues that the grand stairway to the glory facade was never part of Gaudí's own blueprint, that it was designed by successors after the 1926 fire destroyed the originals, and has been attributed to Gaudí retrospectively. If true, the eviction of 1,000 families would be carried out not to honor Gaudí's vision, but to honor someone else's interpretation of it. The foundation disputes this. Esteve Camps, its executive chairman, says the stairway is part of the original master plan, and that complaints from the neighborhood, though understandable, did not succeed legally. As of early 2026, scaffolding permission for the glory facade has been requested from the Barcelona City Council. Architects have confirmed the expansion plans will proceed. The neighborhood continues to fight. But the question of who ultimately pays the price for finishing the world's most famous building has not been answered. On October 30th, 2025, the Central Tower of Jesus Christ reached 162.91 meters, surpassing the Ulm Minster in Germany, which had held the title of world's tallest church since its completion in 1890. For the first time in 135 years, the world had a new tallest church. And then, on February 20th, 2026, the Jesus Christ Tower reached its full design height, 172.5 meters, 566 feet. The four-armed cross at its peak stands 17 meters tall. Below it, the Tower of the Virgin Mary at 138 meters, her 12-pointed illuminated star, lit for the first time in December 2021, permanently changing Barcelona's nighttime skyline. Below that, the four Evangelists' Towers, the 12 Apostles' Towers, and the three facades in different stages of completion. And at the base, the crypt, where Boccabella is buried, where Gil Pérez was reinterred, where Antoni Gaudí lies in a simple tomb, 100 years after his death. The structural completion of the basilica's main body is expected by the end of 2026, the centenary of Gaudí's death. But the building will continue to be worked on into the 2030s at minimum. The glory facade, its sculptures, its stairways, its permits, its controversies, all still ahead. The Sagrada Família is not done. In some ways, it never will be. Buildings like this are never done. They are amended, restored, debated, and argued over forever. Notre Dame in Paris is still being reconstructed. The Colosseum in Rome has been restored so many times that historians argue about what is original. Westminster Abbey has been building and rebuilding for 9 centuries. The Sagrada Familia joins that company. Except it has done something none of them have done. It has become the world's tallest church while still under construction. Do you think finishing the glory facade, even at the cost of 1,000 families being relocated, is the right thing to do? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for watching our video on how Barcelona built the world's tallest church and did it illegally for 137 years. Until next time.